Hey everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm Mark, and as always, I'm super stoked to dive into some seriously cool tech stuff today.
And I'm Jenny, here to keep Mark from going ×2 times far down the rabbit hole. Though, admittedly, sometimes the rabbit hole is pretty fascinating. Today, we're talking about something that's been buzzing in the tech world: Chinese GPUs.
Yeah, this is huge. I mean, for years, NVIDIA has been the undisputed king of the GPU mountain, right? But lately, there's been this surge of activity in China, with companies trying to build their own high-performance GPUs.
It's like a tech arms race, but for graphics cards. So what's the big picture here? Why this sudden push for homegrown Chinese GPUs?
Well, a big part of it is, unsurprisingly, geopolitics. The U.S. has put sanctions in place, restricting the export of advanced chips to China. So, China's basically saying, okay, we'll build our own.
Makes sense. Self-sufficiency and all that. But it's not like you can just snap your fingers and create a GPU that rivals NVIDIA, right? They've got decades of experience and a massive head start.
Exactly. That's the core of what we're exploring. We've got companies like More Threads and this group called the Six Tigers. Sounds like a martial arts movie. I love it. All vying for a piece of the pie. But here's the thing. The performance gap is, well, significant.
Significant how? Give us some numbers, Mark. You know you love to.
Okay. So, if you compare the current best Chinese designs to something like NVIDIA's H100, which is a beast of a GPU, we're talking about a performance difference of, get this, around asterisk 67 times slower. That's based on things like floating point operations per second and memory bandwidth.
67 times? Wow, that's not even in the same ballpark. So it's like comparing a scooter to a Formula One car?
That's a pretty good analogy, actually. A very fast Formula One car. And it's not just about the hardware itself. There's this whole ecosystem thing.
Ah, the dreaded ecosystem word. We're talking about software, right? NVIDIA's CUDA platform?
Precisely. CUDA is this massive advantage for NVIDIA. It's the software platform that developers use to program GPUs for all sorts of tasks, especially AI and machine learning. It's been around for years, it's super mature, and it has this gigantic community of developers.
So even if a Chinese company could build a GPU with comparable hardware, they'd still need a way for developers to actually use it effectively. And that's a whole different challenge.
Right. Andrew Ng, a big name in AI, even said that building a competitive ecosystem requires millions of developers. That's a huge undertaking.
So what are they doing? Are they trying to build their own CUDA competitor?
They're exploring different approaches. Some are trying to create their own platforms, but another interesting path they're taking is using RISC-V.
RISC versus DOT? That's the open source instruction set architecture, right? The one that's kind of like the Linux of the processor world?
Exactly. It's this open standard that anyone can use to design their own chips. And China is going all in on RISC-V. There's this project called Xiangshan, led by the Chinese Academy of Sciences, that's making some serious progress.
So instead of trying to directly copy NVIDIA, they're going for a different architecture altogether. That's clever. A bit of a flanking maneuver.
It is. And it's not just about avoiding direct competition. RISC-V offers some potential advantages in terms of flexibility and customization. They can tailor the design specifically for AI workloads.
But still, even with RISC-V, they're facing some fundamental challenges, right? Like the actual manufacturing times of these chips.
Oh, you bet. That's another hurdle. The most advanced chips require these incredibly sophisticated manufacturing processes, and China is still playing catch-up in that area. We're talking about extreme ultraviolet lithography and all sorts of incredibly complex stuff.
So it's a multi-pronged challenge. They need to design the chips, build the software ecosystem, and master the manufacturing. It sounds like a massive undertaking.
It is. And the Chinese government is throwing huge amounts of money at it. We're talking about billions of dollars in investment, research grants, and support for these companies.
So they're clearly serious about this. But what's the realistic timeline? Are we going to see Chinese GPUs competing with NVIDIA anytime soon?
Well, soon is relative. The Xiangshan project, for example, has a roadmap that aims for data center-grade RISC-V designs by late 2025. But even then, catching up to NVIDIA's performance, That's going to take time.
And what about the impact on the AI industry? If China succeeds, what does that mean for the rest of the world?
That's a really interesting question. It could lead to more competition, which is generally good for innovation. It could also mean a shift in the balance of power in the tech world, with China becoming less reliant on foreign technology.
It's also a bit of a double-edged sword, though, isn't it? There are concerns about intellectual property and the potential for this technology to be used for things that, well, not everyone might agree with.
Absolutely. There are definitely ethical considerations to keep in mind. But from a purely technological perspective, it's a fascinating development to watch.
It sounds like this is a story we'll be following for years to come. Thanks for breaking it down for us, Mark.
My pleasure, Jenny. Always happy to nerd out about this stuff. And to our listeners, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Chinese GPUs. We'll be back next week with more tech explorations.